guys, how's it going? Today we're planting fall crops in the raised beds right behind me. We recently just cleared some things out. I harvested the green cabbage, some spent flowers we removed. Lettuce was bolting, so that area has been cleared. So we are planting 11 different varieties of things today. So here's what we've got. Oregon sugar pod peas, these are a snow pea. White bunching onions, green onions. Telegraph improved cucumbers. Nantes carrots, black beauty squash, which is our zucchini, royal burgundy bush beans, 3 different types of herbs. We've got parsley, basil, and cilantro. And then we are going to be starting some broccoli and golden acre cabbage inside. So fall crops are those things that can withstand cooler temperatures. I know not everything I'm going to plant today can withstand a frost, but I'll talk about the difference here in a second. But fall crops are like the things we plant in the spring. So broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, beets, carrots, radishes, a lot of different types of greens, green onions, there's a lot of things. You can Google fall crops for your area or ask somebody at your local garden center for a more complete list. Every area will be a little bit different, but those are a lot of the things that we plant here. The reason I've got some warm season stuff is that I am actually planting some of these fall crops along with some warm season crops a little bit earlier in the season as opposed to waiting a little bit longer. So there's a couple of different pieces of information that I think are important for fall crops. First off, you need to know your average first frost date, which you can find by Googling your zip code and average first frost date. When I did that, it told me that ours was October the 4th. So you take that day and then count back to the day you're currently in, and that will give you your growing window. So I know I've got 86 days from today until October the 4th, which may or may not be our first frost date. That's just an average. To grow my things. You also need to know the maturity day of the varieties you've chosen. So let's say like jade bush beans. I'm not planting any of those today. I'm planting royal burgundy, but I know jades have a 62-day maturity. So plenty of time in that 86 days to get those beans up, growing, and producing food from the garden. And that's the best part about fall crops. You know, a lot of our stuff is petering out in the heat. We clear that stuff out and we don't want to waste the space. We want to keep it productive. So we can start these crops to then harvest later on, and it just extends our season so much more. So I'm actually waiting on several things because there are some crops that don't germinate super well in high heat. Things like cabbage and broccoli, which I'm going to start today, but they're going to be inside the studio in more like interior temperatures in there so that I've got little starts ready to go out later on. I also don't start any kind of greens until later, or radishes. So those usually go in about mid to late August. They're such a fast turnaround crop that it's totally fine to wait that long. And then I'm not having to monkey with, you know, shading the crop and all those sorts of things. And then the beauty of planting things a little bit earlier in the summer is that you can squeeze in a little bit of extra warm season crop production. So our beans, zucchini, I'm looking at my seed packets because I can't remember, cucumber, beans, zucchini, yeah, everything else will do cooler, oh, and basil. Everything else will do cooler temps. And some things even improve with cold temperatures. So usually your first average frost date is considered a light frost, which is anything between 28 and 32 degrees. And things like carrots, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, all those things can withstand those temperatures, and they can actually improve in flavor if exposed to a little bit of cold like that. And then there are some crops that can withstand a hard frost, which is anything from 28 down and under. So, you know, a lot of your root crops and things, parsnips and carrots and beets, those things just really, the sugars intensify and get super good when they're exposed to cooler temps. And a lot of people even winter over those root crops underneath the soil surface. I do that with carrots quite often. One other thing is you can add a little bit of a buffer to the maturity day of whatever variety you're growing. So jade bush beans, let's say you want to add an extra week of time to that maturity day. So a 62 day then becomes a 69 day. I still have time within that 86 day growing window because as we get later in the season, you know, the nights are longer, the temps are cooler, and it can take a little bit longer for crops to mature. So you can add that little extra buffer so that you know for sure you're not going to be wasting the space and time trying to grow a specific crop. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at where we're going to be growing all of this stuff. We had cabbage and lettuce in this bed that have been cleared, so this area is good to go. We had peas in this bed, so we'll plant something different in here. We'll probably rotate peas to a different bed. This is where we had phacelia, which was a beautiful flower that self-seeded in this area. Honestly, at this point, I could probably just water this and they would all come back up again because they're such a great self-seeder. Look at the beans we recently planted, up and looking beautiful. And one other spot in here, we've got this area where we had lettuce as well. And then we recently planted another crop of pumpkins. This is Cinnamon Girl pumpkins. There's 2 hills here. They're looking good. I actually had to dig around for these seeds. I accidentally covered them a little bit too deep. but I found them and they came up beautifully. And then we've got our sunspot sunflowers right here, and a whole bunch of other things that are growing and looking good. Parsnips and celery in that bed, leeks in that bed. We've got basil, cherry tomatoes, calendula, and marigolds. I discovered that the drip is not working in this bed very well, so we may not get very good marigold action. So this will be a good spot to put lettuce later on. I can just leave it empty for a moment. The red cabbage over here, it won't be too long to where we're harvesting. The heads are forming up nicely, but they are kind of on the small side. And then in that bed, we have Walla Walla onions. We also have a blooming sunflower. What? I didn't even notice. Oh, look at that. See, that's a volunteer right there. I staked it up and everything this time around. Oh, that's just sweet. Okay, the rest of this is pretty straightforward. It's gonna look all the same. I'm just gonna amend the soil with some starter fertilizer and land and seed compost. It's super important when you're trying to maximize production. I mean, you're using the heck out of the soil nutrients in the area you're planting, so it's good to replenish. If you make your own compost, awesome. Add some of that in. Add in whatever kind of goodies you can to help amp that soil up so it's ready for the next crop, so the next crop has plenty to feed on. I'm horrible about coming along mid-season and fertilizing. I mean, I'll admit it. I am really good at amending in the beginning. So it's just part of my habit, and I feel like as long as I get that going, my crops do pretty well. So this is what we've got. Typically I'll add in some biotone and like work it into the soil, and then I'll just even top dress with land and seed. It makes everything look nice, and it does make its way down into the soil. All right, so now we're gonna get all of these planted in the raised beds, then we'll move into the greenhouse to get these potted up in their trays, and then move them into the studio so they have cooler temps to germinate in. I also need to go grab some tags, some ID tags. All done, planted, watered in. It looks really good. And I love that every square inch of this garden has something planted in it. So I did the 3 herbs over here. The cilantro I did in the longest row because, you know, we cut that quite often. So 1 row of cilantro, 1 row of the basil bouquet, and 1 row of parsley. I decided to go ahead and put the cucumber in the marigold area because I think by now I should have seen more germination from the marigolds. I did troubleshoot a lot of the drip, so it's working a little bit better now. So we should be good. And you know, if some of the marigolds come up, great. I'll probably train the cucumber to kind of grow down over the sides anyway, and maybe we'll have a little color intermixed. In this bed, we have 4 rows of cabbage and 3 rows of the Royal Burgundy beans. Then we've got 1 zucchini hill right here in the middle of this trellis, and then 4 rows of green onions in between the zucchini and the Walla Wallas there. And then in this bed I planted Oregon sugar pod peas right around the trellis, and then I'm just leaving the outer ring here because I can come in with spinach in just 1 month and plant a row of spinach around the peas. Okay, let's go plant these in the greenhouse now. Little update on Erin's 1 plant per pot project while we're here. Things are looking good. Got some good color. Okay, so I've got my 2 trays right here. I'm gonna go ahead and plant all of the cells. So 1 full tray of cabbage, 1 full tray of broccoli. I think this packet of broccoli only has 25 seeds, so I'll just be doing 1 seed pretty much per cell, except for the last one, which we'll get 2, and we'll just see what we get. A few things that I'm gonna do differently with my seed starting, particularly in here, like these today are gonna move to the studio because we need cool temperatures for them to germinate, but I'm going to make sure to bottom water all my seed trays. It's something that I've done every year leading up to this one, and I just figured while we're out here in the greenhouse, I don't need to bottom water because I can be more free with my water, because I don't need to be worried about making a mess and so on and so forth. But it's not as good for the plants, because for us, we have a lot of hard water, so I had hard water build up on a lot of my seedlings. It also, like, the plants do better when they can soak water up from the bottom, and it's a little bit more controlled, I find. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm using these seed starter kits, I think is what they're called, from Gardener Supply, that I've been using for the last few years, and they come like the bottom reservoir, the wicking mat, and all that, and I'll show you in the end what that looks like. You know what, I've got a little bit of seed starting mix and a little bit of potting soil. I think I'm going to do a blend. We'll see how that goes. Ooh, that's dry. Look at that. Poof. All right, this is perfect. Moistened enough to where it all kind of sticks together, but no water really drips out of it when I squeeze it really hard. I overshot a little bit on how much soil I just mixed up. So I'm just gonna let it dry out. It'll dry out in a day, sitting here in this tray, and then I'll just pop it back in a bag and we'll re-moisten it when we're ready to use it later on. Going about a 1/4 inch deep for our cabbage, and about a 1/2 inch deep or so, 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep for our broccoli. About 10 extra seeds in that packet. I'll double up in some of these. Oh, it feels so good in here. Oh my goodness, nice and cool. I already made room for them under the grow lights. So this is the kit I was talking about. I've showed it several times, but for those of you who haven't seen these, they're really handy. One, they fit in this light system beautifully, and we've got several of them in here, so I can fit 5 of them per light, and that's pretty nice. And so this is the water reservoir here, and then, I shouldn't have put this on here yet. And then it's got a little platform right there and a wicking mat. And the wicking mat on this side goes back underneath. So it just folds over the side and goes underneath into the water, which I'll fill in with water. And then the wicking mat takes up the water and it travels across the top of there. And then the soil will wick it up as it needs it. And so it really reduces the amount of times or the amount I need to water them, so I don't have to check on them all the time. And I probably wouldn't have really known the difference between bottom watering and overhead watering had I not tried it out pretty extensively both ways. And if you haven't tried bottom watering, oh, I sure would try it. Even if you don't have this kind of thing, if you have a watertight tray like this, you can fill the bottom with a little bit of water and then just go back out after a little while and pour out whatever is left. Like, let the cells have a chance, the soil have a chance to draw up what it needs, and then, you know, an hour later go out and pour out whatever's left, and that way you've bottom watered, but you don't have to have, you know, this whole setup. It is more tedious because you have to be on it and you can't let your plants sit in the water or they can rot. So there is that kind of trade-off, I guess, but boy, I had such better luck doing it this way. And I think all of my big watering cans have migrated toward the house, so I'm just gonna pull the hose in here to fill those up. Those are done, and while I've got the hose in here, I'm gonna go ahead and water the rest of this stuff real quick. And that's pretty much it for today. So those cabbage and broccoli, they will come out into the garden probably toward the end of next month, I'm guessing. Maybe a little bit sooner than that, depending on how things go. And then the next thing that we harvest out here is gonna be the onions. So we'll be taking those out, and then the red acre cabbage. Everything else will pretty much stay to the end of the season. I might pull the calendula at some point too, depending on where we decide to put garlic in. I usually plant my garlic out here in one of the raised beds, or two of the raised beds typically, but depending on how the rest of the fall crops go, garlic may end up out in the big garden, which would be kind of a fun experiment. I'm gonna start with brand new seed this year. I've been using off my own seed stock for a really long time, and I wanna try some new varieties. I had a kind of a poor garlic year compared to previous years, mostly due to watering issues on my end, but I think it'd be fun to try some new varieties out as well. So the next fall crops we'll be putting in will be next month, and that will be the greens, the seedlings I started today. I probably won't do any radishes, mostly just greens. Again, check with your local garden center or Google a list of fall crops and kind of figure out what you still have time to do this season. If you've got any open spots in, even though it's hot, a lot of stuff can go in now, which is exciting. So we should see some growth here probably really quick with all the heat. We'll see some germination, and then we can get them up and get them going. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.